Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your marriage without your man's conscious effort so that you feel desired and taken care of and special, even if your relationship feels completely hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today I'm talking about how to accomplish more by doing less. My guest, Hindi, was so disappointed to realize she'd missed the signs that her husband had Asperger's, no social skills, and was lazy, and now she was stuck married to him. She felt so unloved and hopeless and stupid for choosing him. But today, she realizes her husband was always there for her, and she says her marriage is full of passion and romantic dates. He even got a raise and started working longer hours. She and her husband are both so excited and things are so good with them. They are planning to grow their family. What did she do that changed everything in her marriage? She's going to tell us so you can do it too. And then I'll be giving out the Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award, which is from a tweet from an organizational psychologist and author about being honest in a relationship. And to quote the student who sent it into me, it's pretty messed up. All that's coming up. But first, I'm going to share how to accomplish a lot more by doing less. When everything in your marriage feels like it's on your shoulders, it's pretty exhausting. It's very stressful and it's lonely. If your to-do list is a mile long, but it never gets you any closer to feeling relaxed and supported and taken care of, then I'm excited to share 3 ways to get a lot more done without having to do it all yourself. Number 1, say, I can't. Let's say you're relaxing on the couch and your husband asks you to drive across town in traffic and you can't think of anything you'd rather do less. And let's further imagine that if you do this errand, you're going to become stressed. You're going to be overdrawn. Or let's say that even if you don't drive across town, if you stop playing on your phone or watching your show, that's also going to leave you short on reserves. How should you respond to his request? Of course, you want to be a good wife, and that includes being a team player who helps out. But given the choice between a wife who's stressed and possibly cranky, or one who doesn't help out but is happy and smiling, which one do you think your husband would choose? Which one sounds more like a good wife? If helping him is going to interfere with your self-care or your happiness, then it's probably too high of a price to pay. The phrase I like to use in that situation is, I can't. That's it. Just those 2 powerful words. It's shorthand for I can't, or I'll miss my self-care and I'll be irritable, or I can't say yes to you right now without saying no to myself. I don't say all that. I just say I can't. It's really an effective phrase that was trained out of me at an early age. What I learned and practiced saying a lot was, I can do anything if I put my mind to it. Maybe you learned the same thing. But if I'm honest, I used that phrase to do anything for everyone else while I neglected myself for sometimes months at a time. And I'm sure that wasn't the intent of the can-do slogan, but that's where I ended up. And I see my students doing the same thing. It's true that I can do anything I want to, but I can't do everything I want to. I have limits, and honoring those limits is one of the best ways I can honor myself and be the good wife, the dignified wife, the happy wife that I set out to be. And just like the Queen of England, I don't defend, I don't have to explain. Number 2, express your desires. No list of how to accomplish more by doing less would be complete without talking about expressing your desires in a way that inspires your husband. I shared about that on last week's podcast, number 116, how to ask for what you want in marriage. So if you've been asking your husband for help and no help is forthcoming, that is really worth listening to, that podcast number 116. He's probably missing the critical information he needs to be able to help you, even though you feel like you're telling him. If you missed that podcast, just go listen to that right now. We'll wait. Number 3, stop being too helpful. If you want to accomplish more by doing less, I want to invite you to think about the ways that you help your man that you might consider trusting him to do on his own. Do you make the food for the kids when he's the one who's going to be feeding them? Or do you give him the look when he wears the wrong clothes? Or do you remind him when it's time to go to the gym or the doctor or take the cars for an oil change? If you're anything like I was, you might be too helpful. How would it be for you when you're tempted to help him if he asks you what he should do to experiment with this magical phrase? Whatever you think. If he says, "Are these pants okay?" Whatever you think. Or if he says, "Should I take the car in this week or next week for service?" You could say, "Whatever you think." Think with me here about what's possible if you did this. What would your marriage be like 6 months from now? Would your burden be lighter because your husband can take care of things that used to be your responsibility? What we see again and again on the campus, and this was surprising, is that helpful in wife language is critical in husband language. When you show that you trust your husband, he gets the opportunity to be your hero. And you get the intimacy back and you get to relax more too. Because the truth is, you can either be helpful and tell your husband what to do, like he's a child, or you can have the intimacy and the connection that you crave. And you can have his help. But you can't have both. It's like light and dark. If you're too helpful, the intimacy will leave. He's not going to be motivated to do things. If you want more intimacy, then you'll want to stop being too helpful. Being able to choose which one you want, well, that's like having a superpower. If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest. My guest, Hindi, was so disappointed to realize she'd missed the signs that her husband had Asperger's, and now she was stuck married to him. She felt so unloved, hopeless, and stupid for choosing him. But today, she realizes her husband was always there for her, and she says her marriage is full of passion and romantic dates. She and her husband are both so excited and things are so good with them. They are planning to grow their family. What did she do that changed everything in her marriage? Well, she's going to tell us so you can do it too. Hindi, welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm really excited.
Oh, well, that's great. I want to hear the whole story. So tell us what things were like in the bad old days.
So in the bad old days, I was constantly doubting myself that I made the wrong choice. I kept thinking I should have married a different guy that I dated. This was a mistake and it's a disaster. And something is wrong, like fundamentally with my husband. And I felt like I chose the wrong guy and I made a big mistake. I felt always guilty and beating myself up for not having seen signs.
It sounds really painful, lonely, scary. And you have a child together.
Yes, and that made things harder and more scary for me.
Yeah.
I felt like I messed up in a big way. And how didn't I read the signs before I decided to go and have a family with my husband?
What were things that you were noticing after you were married that you felt like you'd missed before you were married?
My husband being too aggressive, like maybe, in a really bad way. Like I was always worried he was too aggressive with other people, towards his family, towards my family. I felt like he's going to be teaching like bad lessons to my son, and like he would be. I don't know. It was scary.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were pretty worried he was setting a bad example for your son.
Yeah.
And so were you guys fighting a lot, or was it more like Cold Wars, or just like roommates, or how would you characterize? What was your marriage like?
So a little bit of all those. I did a lot of stonewalling. Like if I was upset, I didn't say why, and I would be like, he needs to know why I'm upset, and he should help me and make me happy. And everything was his fault always.
Well, did you ever get to a point where you thought, like, I can't go on like this?
Yes, I had a lot of those times. And yeah.
You have any examples of when you felt really low?
So I'd say my lowest point was after I had a thyroidectomy. They removed my thyroid because I had thyroid cancer.
Oh.
Yeah, and I felt like my husband wasn't available for me, and I felt like I was in it alone. And at that point, I felt like this is even more painful than not being married. I can't keep going on like this. And I mentioned to my husband, like, I cannot stay married anymore. Like this is headed to divorce.
Wow. How did he respond to that?
He felt really bad. He apologized for his behavior and said he would be better and that he will be more involved, and he feels so bad. And he really wanted to make it work. He was like, he said, I can't believe this is headed in that direction. He was shocked.
Yeah. So you were seriously thinking about ending your marriage, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I
That's
don't know
great.
how practical it was at that point, but it definitely was a dream. At that point, I thought
Yeah, a
that would be
dream.
the answer.
Right? Something you kind of fantasize about in a way. Yeah, you weren't building the foundation under it just yet, it sounds like. So, and you believed he had Asperger's. What were the reasons you thought that?
I thought he was very socially awkward. Like if in public he would say anything, like I would always be cringe. Like, oh, that's so cringy. Like, why is he saying that? Why is he doing that? That's socially inappropriate. I even got to the point where I told him like who he could talk to, when he should say what he should say, so he should sound more presentable. Because I thought that was my job to make sure my husband.
I'm just smiling because yeah, I remember doing the same thing, and it didn't really work in our marriage. So how did it work in your marriage?
It was terrible. My husband didn't want to spend time with me. He was like every time I would like just spend time with him, I would criticize him for something he's not doing or something he did that was wrong. And I think he just really checked out.
Mm, yeah, sounds so lonely. So what happened?
So what happened was I got to the point where I felt like there's no hope anymore. We tried marriage counseling, which was a disaster. I felt like we were just it just like really it just emphasized everything that was wrong. So like if my husband wasn't a good communicator, and that's how I felt in the sessions, we would talk about how bad his communication was, and he would in turn become more aggressive, and then that would prove that he really is really aggressive. So I
Ugh.
didn't feel like it would help in any way. And when people were like, "Oh, did you try marriage counseling?" Like, yeah, tried that. Didn't work very well for me. And I just,
Yeah.
when people weren't for my marriage, I also felt like everyone's like, oh, so he said that? He did that? There was no encouragement of like, marriage is a sacred, sanctified thing. And the fact that you just like got married is godly almost, and like, I don't know. I just,
So people were telling you to leave him?
I would say that there was a little bit of encouragement in that area. I don't know if, yeah, I would say
Or
people were
okay.
saying like, you deserve better. And
Yeah. Yeah. So it doesn't sound like you had much support. Marriage counseling wasn't helping. And it sounds like your circle of friends and family was basically telling you, yeah, you deserved better, which is like a code for you should leave him. Right. So what did you do? You're still married now. So what happened?
so after there was a big move that my husband did for me. I moved from Milwaukee to New York, back to my family. And when I recognized he did that move just for me, um, I think that started showing me that that he really cared about me and loved me, and would do anything for me. And then I had a friend who had mentioned to me your book, like maybe even 2 years before I really got into it. And she had told me, this is really good. You should get into this. And I was like, nah, nobody really knows about marriage. Like nobody's going to teach me something new. I've tried marriage counseling. I've read all the books. Everyone's saying the same things. There's nothing new in this. Like, this is really not going to help me. I was like, whatever. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's probably just like in La La Land. So I was like, no, thank you. I'm gonna just keep doing what I'm doing, which is basically going nowhere.
Yeah.
But after I moved to New York, I was a little more open to it, and I started reading. And the first thing I did was I listened to your podcast, and that's when everything changed. It was one podcast. It was the first podcast, I think, was actually your first podcast. I found it on Spotify, and I was hooked. Like the first thing you said, it completely shifted my whole perspective on marriage. I finally felt like this is someone who understands what marriage is all about. Like somebody, I don't know, it really clicked to me. And then I came home and I was a changed woman. I would say that was the day I decided I'm going to make this work. I'm going to I'm going to get out of the fence, and I'm just going to be like, this marriage is going to work, and I'm going to do everything I can to do it. And there's somebody who is promising me that if I use her skills, it's going to get better. And I came home, like my husband's like, what's wrong with you? What happened? And I was like, nothing. I'm just really happy to see you. This is great. Like, so happy I'm married to the best guy in the world. Things got really good from there.
Wow. So he noticed a difference in you from the first, all you did was listen to a podcast, and he noticed you were different because you were different, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I also promised myself I'm never going to say the things that are the wrong things to say, no matter how much I feel like I want to say them. And I made the commitment that I'm going to do whatever you say is the right thing to do, because you've turned your marriage around, and I wanted to do that too.
Wow. Okay. So, and that can be kind of a challenge to do, right? Thoughts come into your head that were maybe they're kind of a habit, right? The things that you have been critical about your husband for. So how did you get yourself to not say those things? Or how did you do with that?
So I surrounded myself with a support group, like female friends who were 100% in on this method. I had some friends who were like, I read her book, but I disagree with some things. Or, I only went with the person who said, I am sold in on Lord Doyle. Like, and then I knew that I got myself a good support group, because they would always stand for my marriage, and they would always stand for me stepping up the game and making this work. So.
Oh, yeah. So having a community, at least one person, it sounds like just even one person made a big difference for you. So let's say you'd have a thought about like, oh my gosh, he's being so aggressive right now or socially inappropriate, and I want to tell him about that. Like, what would you do differently than what you had been doing?
So I would do like your steps. I would copy them, and I would do exactly what you said. You would recommend for me. And I had a friend who, me and her have like a chat where we just talk about our wins and our challenges. So we would always be accountable. And I always felt like, I can't do this, because I'm part of this group that commits to doing the right thing. I cannot go and now be making the wrong, doing the wrong things.
Yeah. So you felt you were being held accountable by this group, it's all voluntary, but it gave you some structure to help the changes stick. It sounds like it must have been a pretty big change from what you'd been doing.
It was a crazy change, but it was the most rewarding thing was seeing other people's marriages and seeing like how, whoa, I would never say that. Like all of a sudden it really like clicked to me that there's a rule to marriage. There are some guidelines to how you gotta, how to be appropriate. Why is it okay to go in a therapy session and bash your husband? Like that's not cool. Like what, and why are we like constantly saying that our husbands are at fault or stuff like that? That's just not okay. And those messages and seeing how people don't know better made me realize that, wow, I need to stick with this because it looks bad.
Yeah, right. That looks unpleasant over there. You're suffering. And so you had you were wearing new perspectives, I guess, from what you're describing.
Yes.
Okay. And so you were not criticizing him. That was probably the first thing, it sounds like, that you started doing differently.
Yeah. And just being grateful for everything.
Tell me about that.
So right in the beginning, I was always upset that my husband didn't help enough at home and that he wasn't really involved in my son's life. But then when I started being grateful for every time he was involved, and I really realized what you focus on grows, and that it really helped in that area. Also spending time with me. I used to be so pushy about like, you need to spend more time together. We need to have dates. This is not okay. Like, and I realized when I started being in the present and appreciating every time he did spend time with me, that made him want to do more of that. Like he wanted to be around a pleasant, fun, happy person, not a naggy, annoying wife.
Right. Right. Yeah. Or the stonewalling too, right? That can be really scary, I think, for our husbands. So when he was seeing you happy, you were like a magnet to him.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you stopped criticizing, you were grateful, you became happier. It sounds like too, pleasable.
Yes. Yes.
And anything else? What else did you do differently than you had been?
I apologized a lot, and I still apologize constantly for doubting him, for making him feel bad about the decision that we had to move when it was I pushed him into it, and then later it was not the best choice for either one of us. And he never blamed me for it. I always blamed him for it, even though I pushed the move. Um, and I apologize very much. And one really kind of romantic story. After I went into the Lord Doyle things, I think within 2 weeks, I started feeling very guilty about how I treated my husband. And I told my friend about it. And I said, like, I feel really bad for what I did. She said, you can just apologize for it. So I did. And I asked him at that point, like, what made him stick through with me no matter what? Like, he was always committed. He never threatened divorce. He never, even no matter how miserable I made him. And he said, there's a story of an old couple who used to walk together every day. The wife had dementia and the husband would walk with the wife every day. And people asked him, like, what's wrong with you? Like, she doesn't even know who you are. Why are you walking her every day? And he said, she doesn't know who I am, but I know who she is.
Beautiful. Making me cry. So that is super romantic. You must have felt really loved.
It's hard to explain. Things have gotten so romantic. And yeah, that was just a tip of the iceberg.
Wow. So yeah, I do. I love that about your husband. He was always so devoted to you. He was always committed to you. What's your marriage like now?
It's amazing, and there's constantly every day it's just great. It's like we have a really good rapport. Like we just are always happy to see each other, and there's a lot of affection, and there's really romantic dates. I feel like I'm the girl in the movie, the lucky woman who's been chosen, like the Cinderella, almost every day. So it's amazing.
So you are a Disney princess. It's kind of, right? We all want to be that. I think I do. I like being a Disney princess. So, and you do too. It sounds like you got a big smile on your face right now. Oh, I love it. And you have the one son, and after the turnaround in your marriage, and it is a pretty big turn. Did other people notice that your marriage had changed?
Probably, but nobody's been like very blunt out about it,
Yeah, yeah, I hear it. So, how about your son? How did it impact your son?
In an amazing way. I mean, I was always so anxious for him to spend time with my son that he'd be a bad influence. And now I see that he's an amazing father. He has so much to contribute in parenting. And I give them as much time as possible, because I feel like he's an amazing father and my son has a lot to gain from him. And I think he's much happier now that we're happy and I'm happy. I think it makes a big difference.
Wait, so the guy that you were worried was a bad role model for your son, you now see him as a great father? What happened there? What changed?
I always thought he has to be the father figure that I imagine, like somebody who's throwing a kid up in the air and like running. I'm so excited to see their kid and like grabbing them and like hugging them. And like, that's what I envisioned of what a father should be like. And my husband's more chill. So that's not how he did it. And I realized I'm so grateful that that he has the other aspect of like calmness and just being easygoing and so not dramatic like I am. I think my son can use a little calmness in his life.
God gave him a mother and a father for a reason, it sounds like, right? There's point and counterpoint. Oh, well, so I love that. So, what is your tip for a woman who is where you were, where she just feels like he's too aggressive, he has Asperger's, I made a big mistake, I'd really love to get out of this marriage, but I've got a kid and, she's kind of on the fence where you were, and she wants what you have now, where it's full of passion and romance, and you guys are thinking of growing your family now, I heard, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Now,
we recently moved to a bigger house.
oh, you did.
Hmm.
Okay. And so, and do you ever feel like you climb back up on that fence anymore about staying in?
No, I've
No.
made a full on commitment, and I'm 100% in at this point.
And I bet that's a lot more comfortable.
It's more happy. There was nothing happy about being on the fence. Like absolutely nothing happy about it.
Yeah. There seems like to be a lot happy. Okay. So what is your tip for a woman who wants what you've created now, bigger house and a better father and just feeling so happy to be with her husband?
I would say start with listening to the podcast and just getting off the fence and realizing that your husband's an amazing, amazing person, that you chose him for a reason. You did. I mean, I go back now and I think of all our romantic dates. I used to think of all our dates and like all the red flags that I missed. Now I go back to my dating and I'm like, wow, he wowed me. Like, that's why I married him. Like, he's the most romantic and loving and sensitive and handsome man, and that's who I married. And I think going back to the reasons and committing yourself to making it work and being a positive person and taking responsibility.
Yeah. I do hear your tremendous accountability, Hindi. I love that about you because it seems like from day one, you started looking at your side of the street and how you could clean it up. And that's been powerful for you. And he noticed starting on day one. So I love that. What do you think you would say to Hindi if you could go back in time, knowing what you know now? What would you want to tell Hindi from before?
I would say just be grateful for what you have. You have everything you need. Like, you have the best husband you could possibly have, and he chose you and he loves you and he'll do anything for you. He just wants to make you happy. You need to just try to find a happiness and appreciate everything that you have, because the more you focus on it, the more that'll grow. And you could be happy and he will be happy.
Yeah, beautiful. It's very inspiring how you went from fantasizing about ending your marriage to really getting the full measure of enjoyment, pleasure, and feeling loved and loving him, and really giving your son that home court advantage of parents who love each other. Congratulations, Cindy.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for sharing all the details of your story with us. I'm sure you inspired a lot of listeners.
Thanks for having me.
If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest. And now it's time for the Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award.
It's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice. Yeah, it's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice of the week.
And the advice it has me seething this week came from a student who writes, I'm not sure if this qualifies as worst relationship advice, but it seems kind of messed up to me. And I couldn't agree with you more. This advice will mess up your marriage in a hurry. So I wanted to give you a shout out to thank you for the great contribution to the podcast, because this is just the kind of thing that I might have thought was actually true back in the bad old days. Great job spotting the gobbledygook. The advice is a tweet from an organizational psychologist and author who says, in toxic relationships, you're forced to choose between honesty and loyalty. You bite your tongue to protect their ego. In healthy relationships, honesty is an expression of loyalty. You speak your mind to help them grow. When you have real trust and respect, candor shows care. Yeah. So, first of all, it's your job to help your partner grow. So, you should speak with candor to show that you care. Ooh. I used to thoroughly believe this, sadly. I thought it was just the facts, Jack. That I had to say what I honestly thought, even if it was devastatingly critical and also absolutely none of my business. I'd say things like, honestly, I would not wear that to your job interview if I were you. I didn't hold back because I thought that would help him grow and improve. But what happened instead is my husband got defensive. And that's pretty understandable, If your wife says, you have no idea how to dress yourself, bozo, who wouldn't be defensive? I completely wrecked the emotional safety with my so-called honest comments. My quote unquote candor created wall-to-wall hostility and tension and distance at our house. And I didn't know why. I was just trying to help him grow. One of the most valuable things that I've learned from my husband, who is relentlessly kind, is that I grow a lot more when I feel safe. I guess you could say he bites his tongue to protect my ego, but it feels like he's just always got my back. He decides to see me through loving eyes. Even if I'm cranky, even if I'm on a rant because I just read some ridiculously exasperating relationship advice. So it's given me a lot of inner strength to feel so accepted and loved, even though I also feel known and seen, warts and all. For that reason, the advice that in healthy relationships, honesty is an expression of loyalty. You speak your mind to help them grow, and candor shows care. Well, it's the very, very worst relationship advice I've heard all week. Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. Next week, I'll be talking about the key to creating mind-blowing intimacy. In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that I've been eating super healthy, but still always on the lookout for the chocolate cake and nachos diet. Let me know if you find it.